Welcome to Built Together, the podcast where design, technology, and leadership meet to shape the spaces where we work, learn, and connect in. In every episode, you'll hear from architects, engineers, technologists, and innovators who are breaking down the silos and rethinking how we create spaces that truly bring people together. Because great spaces aren't just about the plans or the tech, they're about the people. And it's what's possible when we build together. Thank you and welcome to Build Together. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Built Together. This podcast is a show where we talk about how people, spaces, and systems come together to shape the way we learn, work, and collaborate. Today, we're hanging out with Jokya Sanders from Duke University's Sanford School of Public Policy. Jokya is an AV and IT leader who has spent his career building and supporting learning environments that actually work for real people, right? Faculty, students, staff, all across Duke. At Stafford, he serves as an IT analyst, which means he's in the middle of everything from classroom technology to hybrid events, also supporting their digital experiences for policy and faculty students. But, one of the interesting things that we're going to talk about and what this episode is all about is how he got into AV, how he saw the AV IT convergence wave early, and what it took to move towards a software-driven classroom environment. So we're really going to kind of get to the basis of how he thinks and really just get to know you a little bit better. So thank you for joining me on Built Together, man. How you doing?
Doing good. First thing, Xavier, thank you for inviting me to this podcast. I think what you're doing here is great. And I'm excited to see where this particular episode as well as others go and how it impacts the AV industry as well as other areas.
I think that this episode in particular will have a profound impact on the industry, and not just from a technical or mindset standpoint, but simply because it is just a refreshing way to approach AV, and you're just an interesting person, man. I mean, we've had conversations, so I'm really excited to kind of get into not only this episode, but just more about you and what you're doing at Duke. And so with that, I would really like to kind of start from the beginning, right? So how did you first get into AV, and what did those early days in AV kind of look like for you?
That's a great question. I would say that I got started probably as many of I'll say my colleagues and sort of my world get started. And that's in the church. I was about maybe 12, 13 years old, and I was getting to that age where I was maturing a little bit. And so, one of the things that my mom wanted me to do is participate more in the church. And the church I was at in particular had great African-American mentors who would always take young men and work with them and just walk alongside of us. And so in this particular case, I had a mentor named John Allen, who was let's say that he was the director of the AV ministry at my childhood church. And so, first thing he did was, sit me behind the camera and show me how the camera works. And it sort of built up from there. I went from working the camera in the church to working the soundboard to getting into their studio and understanding how the complex system of switching various cameras. It was a sort of 3-camera setup or a 3-camera show. So all of the things that go into a actual video production that's being very recorded for studio purposes. And so from that point, that's sort of where I got my start and built up from there.
I think the church is such a foundational place for learning about technology and AV. Now, when I was growing up, I grew up in the church as well. I never really realized what was going on around me technically, right? I mean, you have your choirs, you have your sermons, and in some churches, you even had your kids' rooms that they had displays or other things in to keep kids entertained. But I never really like paid too much attention to how technology was shaping the church. And I think that when you go to a church that has a really good handle on technology and they understand how it impacts the congregation, it's a crazy experience. But I know so many people who in AV have, they've gotten their start either being the helping hand in the church, running cables or whatever that may be, or some of which in theater and all those different things. It's so important to speak to that simple fact that you just said, right? That there were mentors in the church that took you and really taught you what was going on behind the scenes. Representation means a lot in our industry, and I think that mentorship means that much more. And I appreciate hearing stories from people who kind of speak to what mentorship did for them and how it brought them into the industry. And my entry into the industry was also one where someone older than me and someone who saw something in me, saw that I had a bit of talent and kind of helped me along in that way. And so to hear that from you is amazing. And so obviously, things change, right? You went from the church and
Oh
then you
yeah.
went into to higher education, and
Yes.
it's curiosity that keeps you going, right? And the same was true for me, and how going from live events all the way into integration and distribution and different aspects of the industry. But in your transition going from the church to higher education, was there a moment where you like realized that what you were doing kind of stopped just being a job, and you realized like, okay, this is actually a lane for me, like it's my lane and I can build a real career in this industry? Was there a moment that happened, or was there like a person that kind of like you know kind of believed in you and put that message inside of your head and kind of shaped the way that you approach this AV thing from a career standpoint, and taking it from just being a job to more of a career and having aspirations in the industry?
Right. So I'll talk a little bit about before it became real. Even all the way into college, I transitioned from the church going into college. I didn't necessarily take AV seriously, right? So I had tons of fun, learned, had tons of skills, gained tons of skills from the church. And when I transitioned into college, it was just a way to make money and really to kind of show off my technical prowess. Like, oh, I know how to do this and I know how to do that. And I became that big man. Some people say nerd, but that big man on campus. I had all the keys to all the doors, and I could, go to all the events and work the events. And I had, as a student, really deep access to the campus that I was attending. So that was great. But the thing is I was doing such a good job and having so much fun that when I graduated, I went off into the world. I got my degree in business. So I went off into the world and tried to do, a couple of different things. And all of a sudden, I get a phone call from my old school from the North Park University. And they say, hey, well, you did such a great job while you were here. We want you to come back, and we want it to be full time. We want to, we want you to be an employee here. And, you know, without question, I said yes because it was fun, but I didn't realize how all that experience, all that time, that entire skill set would have brought me to that point where, oh, now this is real. Now I'm going to be getting a real paycheck from it. Now I'm going to be able to move forward in my life in terms of quality of life and the opportunities that I would have by this opportunity. And so, yeah, that was pretty much how that's the moment where it became, uh,
I think it sets the foundation for how you see the work, right? It's not just tech. It's you understand some of the business aspects to what the technology could do. And I can tell you, for me, when I started to get paid, right, from doing AV, I was actually surprised that people got paid for doing this, because it was so much fun. There was just, and like you mentioned being a nerd, I didn't even I would never consider myself a nerd until I start falling in love with AV, because the technology is just so fascinating that you want to dive into more and more of how it works. You almost naturally become curious, at least if you care about it as a career, or you care about the industry as a whole.
absolutely.
There's so many things to be fascinated by. And for me, early on, AV was always kind of one of those things where I never saw it as a means to an end. I always saw it as something that was doing something really, really magical for people. And obviously, in live events, you see that firsthand. You're doing a wedding or a bat mitzvah or an award ceremony or a charity event, and you see the impact that it has. And everyone else may not know, right? No one else knows the chaos that kind of goes on behind the scenes. But it's always for me been a really good medium to be able to channel like caring about people and what they experience. And so one of the things that when you and I had a conversation before, And kind of going back to the transition to going into the university, what does your role kind of look like at Duke University?
So I'll talk a little bit about how I got to Duke University in the position that I am in now, starting from, that transition from working from North Park full time. So full time at North Park gave me access to so many things, including the ability to pursue a master's degree at no cost. So that was an awesome opportunity. So I took it, went through a seminary program before I got to the business school. But once I got into the business school and I started understanding more so of the business side of how universities work or just business in general, and I was already working in the IT department at North Park, my brain sort of exploded with all of these different opportunities, new knowledge, ways of understanding how technology works, and just getting a new perspective on how to provide really good service to people. Back when I was an undergrad, good service was a great smile, which I still have, even with braces, a great smile. And, you're pushing that cart into the classroom and you're setting it up, and the professor, faculty members, students are very happy that you're there. Right.
Mm,
But then it started to change to, hey, there's this box on the wall and it's there for the professor. They have a remote. They're able to press buttons and it starts working, and the key was just to make sure that it keeps working, but they were still very appreciative of that. My master's and sort of coming from that perspective opened up all different opportunities. And the question became, how can I provide better service for my constituents, for my campus, for my community? And that's where a lot of the dig into different types of technology in terms of how to provide AV services to my constituents, that's when it
mm,
started to matter. So in 2010, I remember, well, actually in 2009, I remember going to a manufacturer, and I won't say the name unless we're allowed to, but going into a manufacturing training session, taking it, I understood it. I understood it just fine. But I knew in the back of my mind, I'm saying like, hey, if I were to leave or if anything were to happen, the technology here is too complicated and too inaccessible for it to be passed on
mm.
from I'll call it IT perspective. It's not accessible enough. And so after that, I began looking into different ways of being able to provide that same service, in which I came across a software solution at the time. They mentioned all the things all the issues that I have. They said that they could solve it. And I was skeptical at first because I've already been through the entire run of different solutions until I tried it, and it was true that it could. And so I began building that up over time. And, I transitioned from North Park to UNC in North Carolina, right? And I built it up and I got it to be, pretty good there. And then I transitioned over to Duke. And over here at Duke, at the Sanford School, is where the concept is really taken off. Now,
Gotcha.
it took a span of, let's say, from let's say the course of 8 to 10 years for all of that, like the concepts, the technology, the industry catching up, all of it to come together. But boy, oh boy, Sanford is doing very well in terms of the service that we provide, the costs that are involved, the troubleshooting, our ability to adapt, navigate, prepare for the future. You name one the conversational point in terms of how do we do this to make it better, and I have something to say about it.
I think there are two really important points that I want to point out from what you just said. And I really want this to be for the parents, the people that are watching this, especially people that look like us that are watching this, to understand that AV as a career choice can open the door to so many different things. And as you just heard, there universities working in AV at universities can actually provide a pathway to free education. And I think that, not many people know about that as an offering, right? Well, and it's basically your staff, right? Your staff at the university. Staff
That
at the
is correct.
university has access to education in that way, and it's just another way to apply yourself and to get access to education that may be out of reach from an affordability standpoint. We all know that the cost of college is crazy right now, right? But that's that's just one thing I really wanted to point out because not a lot of people know about that. I mean, and I didn't really know about it for a while until I think I was like looking at a job posting for a university, and I think it was like Harvard or something like that. And I was like, oh, let me take a look. They were looking for an AV professional, and then I saw that if you got the job, you had the ability to take classes at Harvard for free. And I was like, yo, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. It'd probably be tough to get that job, right? You know what I mean? But I
Very
can
competitive.
imagine,
Yeah.
yeah, I can imagine that the competitive side of it. I think you're gonna run into competition. I think in any field, right? It's just a matter of being able, like the benefits are pretty substantial. So that I think that was cool. And then the other piece is that you mentioned, it took 8 to 10 years to kind of get to this place where you are today, at Duke University, at Sanford University, and getting that flow of the AVIT kind of convergence and what software really means to and can mean to a university as it relates to the functionality of a classroom, right? The pedagogy changing and different aspects of the classroom. And so what before it was really kind of like mainstream, I guess. What made you see that shift early? Obviously, like the manufacturers training and having those challenges there, right? But obviously, you ran into some challenges, kind of trying to bring this to the forefront. But what made you see it like, all right, this has to change. It's no longer, this is no longer a viable way to approach technology in the classroom, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. That part of it is a cultural piece, right? So, when I was a full-time employee at North Park University, and here we are, we're operation wise, we're on point in terms of delivering projectors to classrooms and pushing around TVs and, shaking that professor's hand and just providing that and getting email after email about how much they appreciate, the service that we provide. And then all of a sudden, in a couple of classrooms, there's these boxes on the wall. Well, what is this box? You walk close to it, and it's a panel that has a VGA cable that's, strapped to it. It has a VCR and a DVD player with this, 5 by 7 maybe control panel. And you press a button and it does whatever you want it to do. Now, granted, you're still getting calls for, hey, I don't know how to work the VCR. Very funny. Hey, I can't, when I plug in the VGA cable, it doesn't work. Like, still calls like that. But nonetheless, it is very clear that this box on the wall does a couple different things. Number one, it provides that accessibility. And then number two, if you do it right, there's cost efficiency there.
Mm,
So even back then, and obviously thinking about it from a business perspective, it was very clear to me, like if you had these in all the classrooms, which they would probably try to do, this would eliminate the need for what I did as that type of employee who's providing that type of analog, let's call it analog service. Now, who put that box on the wall? It wasn't me. It wasn't me as the AV person with those deliveries. It was the IT department. So the
mm,
IT department worked with a AV integrator, and they were the ones who made that whole process and system happen. And they knew right then and there, like, okay, it's time that I would go ahead and connect with the IT department to see what opportunities and like what's the bigger picture here. And
right.
then after that, it was intriguing to me, and it was very obvious that we would sort of move forward with combining the AV department as well as the IT department. So that's where that convergence that convergent was. Was it pretty? No,
I
no.
can imagine.
No, I mean, it
Right,
was
right, right.
when the AV department connect with the IT department from a cultural perspective. It's not this way everywhere you go, but culturally, The IT department didn't necessarily understand the importance of having, staff who understood the technology to go and assist at any point in time. From the IT perspective, they say, well, the system should work the way it's supposed to, and there's no need. But we were able to show them, like, hey, not only not only is this box great, but having someone there to assist with us connecting to the system is also a good thing. Like, what happens if there's a pin in the bent in the VGA cable, or what happens if the touch panel stops working for whatever reason and we need to reboot the whole system.
Right.
The professor, faculty, or student is not going to do it themselves. And good luck, after 6 p.m. when everybody goes home. You never know what you might find the next day.
Yeah, that tension between AV and IT has been a thing for quite some time. I think it's great that we are in a place today where that happens less and less, and I think
Yeah.
that we're as an industry we're evolving and improving in a very rapid pace, right? So like
Yeah.
I think that that is great, but like you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said that the hardware components to like hardware being down or touch panels not working. Traditionally, that's been a very big problem, especially in higher education. Whenever I meet with a university and we're speaking about, say our software, right, T1B, and
Yeah.
kind of like what makes our software unique. One of the key things about our technology that's unique is that when a professor is going into a class, they may not have to. They may not need that touch panel, right? If we have an interactive screen, they can just start the class session directly from the screen. So there's no touch panel or anything like that that's that's kind of getting in the way. But what I've found is that even in those conversations, most of the time, the professors especially feel like they're in a media room or a media session, and they don't want to be producers of a show, right? Like, not a lot of them want to feel that way. And then if that touch panel doesn't work, now the whole class session is done, right? And they have to either postpone class for that day until everything is back up and running, or they have to try to like play musical chairs with classrooms and say, okay, well, I'm going to have to go set up in this room for today. And, now the seating arrangement is off and I can't get my lesson plan, or like there's all these different things that kind of happen in the moments where things go down. And I think that we always think of cost and accessibility. And I think of like, if you look at cost as a spreadsheet item and you go through line item on how much everything costs, like you're not really seeing the full picture of like opportunity costs and what it costs the organization when things fail. Of course, everyone wants to speak to like the optimal functionality of their product, but like, okay, well, what happens when this goes down? Like, what's the fail safe? Like, where are we protected in troubleshooting? And do we have to send someone out there every single time to get this room back up and running? And I think that where schools really run into challenges, or where organizations, not just schools, but like just kind of speaking to schools because of obviously where you are, is like falling into that one programmer trap where it's like, okay, everything is down. We need a programmer to fix this. Oh, but that person's on vacation for 2 weeks. Now it's like, how do we operate the system? And so you see that, right? Like, why do you think universities, organizations fall into that like one programmer or one engineer holds all of the institutional knowledge trap? Like, what kind of risks does that create for a school or even for for your team, for that matter?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about it in a couple different ways. I think the obvious answer is institution could be in big trouble. There's only one programmer that has all this institutional knowledge. And granted, they'll probably think, okay, well, we'll just buy our way out of the problem. This person leaves, we have an issue, we'll just have somebody come in and sort of take care of it, right? And we'll pay them whatever. The person gets in and they're going through the programming, and even though the programming could be beautiful, that it could be from the original programmer's perspective, it could be something that had originally worked with the system, but the new person comes in, they may not understand it, and therefore they're saying, okay, well, now we need to change the whole entire thing and basically start from scratch, kind of thing. And
Hmm.
so, if you think about that from a cost perspective, what does that look like? The other way I think about of that issue is not necessarily this idea of, the one programmer thing, but more so the idea of how can we, when we find problems, how can we solve them? right?
Sure.
There's going to be problems. There's going to be issues that come up. It may not necessarily be the software. It might be the hardware, right? And what I'm finding in today's world is that the software, this particular software that we're using, and some people, even we can dig into a little bit of the AI conversation, but
Yeah,
a
sure.
really good software is able to now understand different issues and resolve issues before they become problems. And so for me, sort of taking a look at, how do we, what do we do about, these issues that come up that might be key and critical, where you would want to bring a programmer in. We say, wait, let's pump those brakes a little bit. Let's see what's actually happening. And software actually gives you the ability to do that. One thing that I'm thinking about in particular is when I first came to Duke University, we had a issue with audio DSPs. And it was a situation where, for some reason, the audio DSP would connect from the touch panel and you could not raise or lower the volume or do anything with it. Now, the first way that you resolve the issue is simply by doing what any technician who's in a live classroom who needs to get the system to work. They either unplug the system or they unplug the DSP, plug it back in. And if it's one of those older model systems, it could take up to 3, 5, 7, sometimes depending on how complicated it is, 10 minutes to come back. And then you're hoping and praying that it fixes the issue. Or if you know it's specifically coming from at the DSP, you unplug it, plug it back in. Hopefully that fixes your issue. But we don't necessarily understand why it's happening. Right. And you talk to the manufacturer say, okay, well, here goes the firmware update, see if it works. You put in the firmware update and it does not work. You still have the same problem. Software now has the ability to be able to give you access to see what the issue is, right? And find a workaround or a fix for that issue. So when I was working with the DSP, I was able to find what's happening here is that the NIC card, network interfacing card, was disconnecting from the network for whatever reason. Let me go ahead and try to figure out how to connect it. So then I go ahead and I find a way to connect it. Very easy, very simple. All you have to do is make sure that this button or whatever command is being sent. Sent command. Okay, I see you again. I'm ready to move forward and act correctly. Right. So that's sort of like step one. I'm proud of myself. Like, oh, I fixed this issue. Now I know what's going on. So anytime there's a classroom that goes down where there's that audio issue, all I have to do is go into the software, find that command, send that command, it's reconnected again. But here's the key. Even with that solution that I was able to create, I still need to go to these classrooms and fix the issue. Well, not necessarily go to them, like I'm accessing them remotely, but I'm fixing the issue. And it's much faster than what we've done before. However, the key with the software and where it puts our services, from my opinion, far above other solutions, is the fact that I programmed the software to be able to see when these issues are happening and be able to apply that fix without me having to be there, right? So that once a week issue that would come up where I'll have to engage now has been eliminated. And we have not had any issues like that since we automated that part of the software.
Yeah, what that does over the time frame of total cost of ownership is it makes that technology or that equipment that much more valuable, right? Because I mean, it's an exciting time. Obviously, I'm saying this because I work for a software company, right? But it's
Yeah.
an exciting time for software. It's an exciting time for what software is going to do for institutions and for organizations, and it's especially as AI becomes more and more involved and ingrained in what we do. It's no secret that AI has been in AV for a very long time, whether that's in DSPs or in different functions, camera tracking, voice tracking, facial recognition, all of those things, right? Like all that stuff is artificial intelligence, but it's now, I think, becoming a solution that is going to save people from the mundane and kind of small, tedious task issues that were so very prevalent before, right? And
Right.
as these hardware manufacturers start understanding and respecting how software can really benefit all involved in every ecosystem, I think that it is going to be exciting to see those things start to communicate together and be less of a kind of lockdown kind of platform. And interestingly enough, I think that it's uh it's only going to help institutions navigate paying attention to the more important things
Right.
in what makes an effective classroom, and that's
Yeah.
retention. That's bringing students, that's getting students to collaborate and actually engage in the materials and to be excited about showing up to campus, or if they're doing hybrid, right, to be engaged with that hybrid environment and actually they're focused on the experience and the human
Exactly.
experience, right? So now
Exactly.
you're taking your time off of being a repair person to
Correct.
to being a person who's thinking of ideas of how to make an experience better,
Right.
and that shift is
Right.
only going to impact universities in a positive way. It's only
Right.
going to impact the students in a positive way, and all in all, it's going to be a better learning environment. So
Right.
I'm
Right.
excited for that, right? I'm excited
Yeah.
for some of the things that we're doing in our software to make that hybrid experience a better one, to ensure that students on the far end of a Zoom call or a Teams call or whatever that may be, that they still feel like they're engaged in the classroom. And obviously AI is going to play a role in that too. And I know that you mentioned we can touch on AI a little bit, but did you have any kind of like stories about how AI is impacting some of the things that you all are doing at Duke, or that that you're
Mhm.
experimenting with yourself, kind of moving forward, or
I think at this time we're still in that sort of understanding phase of what AI can do because even though part of me thought like, oh, with this solution that I was able to implement where the system automatically recognizes the issue and is able to troubleshoot, no, isn't that AI? And then I sort of thought about like, no, there's certain aspects and intelligence that doesn't exist within that system for from an AI perspective, it would need to exist in order for that solution to be AI. So there's still a lot of understanding and playing around with that. I
yeah,
think
sure,
that when it comes to reporting, though, and what I'm looking forward from AI is the ability for a system to tell me, like, hey, this is what's actually happening with your AV enterprise. And I haven't seen that within the AV industry yet. Of course, they're telling you like, oh, Jackie, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And you see like the different notifications, emails, newsletters that they're sending saying AI in this way,
right.
but I have not. I'm looking forward to how AI is going to make the industry as well as people like myself smarter, as well as my enterprise smarter.
Yeah, yeah. I think that when we talk about all different types of features, I think that is one of the most pressing features that I'm sure will come when it may be that it comes from an organization outside of AV in general, right? Like it may be a new startup that is coming from a different part of the world or a different part of the profession or whatever, that just comes into AV and makes those shifts and changes. I know of one technology that is moving towards that, and I just did a podcast episode with that gentleman, with Sam Kennedy at NetSpeak, and they're they're they're
Mm,
they're they're going in that direction. So you two might be good to connect, and I think it may
yeah,
be,
I would love to hear it.
yeah, that you'll
Yeah.
you'll you would actually love to hear about some of the things that they're doing, and I just love what folks are thinking about in software. I
Yeah.
love I
Yeah.
love I love where the conversations are going, where they're headed, and I guess for you and for the university as a whole, with all of these big shifts and big changes, not just in technology, but in pedagogy, right? And how professors are teaching in the environments, the different ways that classrooms are being designed when you have new builds and new construction, and they're like, okay, we're doing a human centered design for this space. And what does that actually look like? It looks different, I think, at every university, but one of the things that is true is that it is a big transition. It's a transition with how professors are going to teach, but it's a big technology transition. So for you all, when the university is going through, big technology transitions, well, whether it be new systems and workflows, what is it that you all are thinking about, and what is it that other organizations should be thinking about, so that change kind of feels smooth, not only for the faculty, but for the students and the support team that has to support this transition, right? This digital transformation, and how, like, what are some of the things that people need to think about so that it is thought about as digital transformation and not a disruption to how things are kind of working in the
Right.
day to day.
So, there's a lot of things that are happening out there, and I think that there's a lot of technical things that are happening out there, and we have to ask ourselves, what problems are we trying to solve, or what are we actually trying to do? And Xavier, I think you hit that nail on the head when you mentioned the experience, right? So, what type of experience are we trying to give our clients, whether that be faculty, staff, students, what have you? And I would say that, speaking for myself, I think that the key is to understand who is in that room using that space, right? So who's in that room using that space? For me, what that means at the Sanford School, I'll speak specifically about, is the people that are using that technology. They only want the basic technology, right? So for us, what that means is, hey, Jack here, I just want to be able to, use my PowerPoint, maybe bring in a laptop, sometimes, maybe a dot cam, like
Mm,
that type of environment. So I'm building an entire experience around that. Now, how can I enhance the system with AI? I don't necessarily know how to make their PowerPoint presentation present more with AI on that side, but I sure would like to know how AI is going to help me understand what happens as we move throughout the year regarding how the technology is being used in the rooms. The one thing that I have not been able to get to, that I'm hoping that either an enhancement what we have or a AI component is being integrated, is have our rooms tell a story. Have
mm,
our rooms tell a story. I want a room, after a long period of time of being used, to give me the type of data that helps me make a business decision. Now I have reports that gives me the data, and I can say, okay, well, this room used the HDMI cable this many times. This room used a USB-C cable this many times. But it's still not telling me. I want to see something that's telling me, that's going to give me the insight needed to say, you know what, in this type of room, we noticed that the dot cam's being used. Maybe we should keep it.
mhm.
Or we know in this type of room, the dot cam's never being used. Maybe we should get rid of it. Like somewhere in that sort of thinking vein, in terms of how we want to move forward with providing these services and providing these resources to at least the people at Sanford. And that's something I'm, continuously working on.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I think that when I think about digital transformation and technology overhauls, especially at the university level, I think that a lot of what you mentioned is key and important. And I also would like to, like, kind of add to that and say I think that it is important for deans and the institutional leadership that are driving the change. I think it's important for them to have those real conversations with, not, I mean, you may not be able to have the conversation with the student body, right? But at least with the institution, like the institutional partners, and say, change is going to come. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. But we need everyone's feedback for what makes that change a bit more comfortable, because we're not just designing for the students, although they are the ones that are kind of paying into the university, but we're also designing for the people that they're paying for, which is without doubt the professors, right? A
Oh yeah,
professor is going to change the way you look at education, and that is that like I've experienced that in my MBA program. Like there are certain topics where I would not be interested or not like I would doze off, if it were up to me. But the professor is so engaging, and so it's like it's everything about them just makes that topic more exciting, and it's you're designing for those folks too. So like you kind of have to have
exactly.
that. Yeah, you kind of have to like say, all right, well, how can we make this? How can we make this technology enhance that special part of you?
Right.
And designing for that. And sometimes it's not very complicated to do that, but the conversation needs to be had because if you try to do a one size fits all for every single classroom, it's going to get challenging. But you can't be too bespoke too, right? Because like you can't say, all
Right.
right, this is built out for this professor, and then that professor leaves, or God forbid something happens. You want to be flexible in that way, but I think that like that's a major kind of piece to what it means to have these digital transformations, and like having a process that says let's test out new technology, let's see what's out there, let's pilot some things, and let's see what's going to work for our university. And I think that at the D1 level in the bigger universities, I think it's easier because they have the staff to do that. And I think that as you kind of trickle down into certain other universities, that may not be the case all the time. But I feel like organizations like HETMA and all that stuff are really cool because it kind of does a lot of that for those institutions. But it's always just kind of interesting hearing it from your side, right?
Yeah.
As a professional that's in that space actively
Yeah.
on day to day.
Yeah, I definitely think that you hit some key points in terms of, hey, and you alluded to this, like the business school looks different than the policy school, looks different than the engineering school. Three different technologies, in terms of classroom resources would be needed for those applications. And I think that the hard question is, because these are how the politics are played out at universities already. The politics of the whole situation is, how can I, if I was sort of at that sort of big Duke centralized level, how can I provide resources to these three different schools? And they might be different resources. It might be different manufacturers for this place, that place, depend on budget, needs, so on and so forth. How can I provide all that and get all that data centralized to, as you know, a buzzword is a centralized or a central pane of glass, one pane of glass kind of thing. So how do we get all these resources from all these different schools into this one thing without it being a situation where everybody has to piggyback off of the same hardware, software, whatever the case may be. And I think that that's part of the key, and that's also part of the challenge, and possibly where we're at in terms of at bigger universities today.
Yeah, well, I can tell you one way that you would be able to visualize all of that information in one single pane of glass is with T1V. No, I'm just kidding.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Had
Yes.
to throw that, had to throw that one in there. Had to throw that one in there. But no, man, I think that this has been a fantastic conversation, man. You dropped so many jewels in just I mean, the way your mind works and the things that you're doing at Duke, they're phenomenal things. Obviously, Duke is an amazing university.
Absolutely.
It has been for quite some time. So it's always great to kind of hear from the folks that are behind that well-oiled machine, that are there on the day to day, that are doing the work each day to bring such an incredible experience to the student body and the faculty. And I'm sure that they all appreciate it. I'm sure that they appreciate you, much like I appreciate you for this conversation. I've had a great time. I hope that you have had a great time. I hope that the conversation has been a fruitful one for you as well. And again, man, I appreciate you for joining me today.
Well, thank you very much. It's been wonderful to be with you, Xavier, and best of luck with everything and all your endeavors.
Well, thank you. I need that luck, so I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna hold on to it. But I want to thank everyone else for listening, for coming and joining us on this episode of Built Together. We can't wait to catch you next time. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.